don't fear nothing but the Most High power. We don't fear nothing but the Most High power. We don't fear nothing.
Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right. First and foremost, I want to say all praises to Ahaya, Bahashem Yeshaya. We're here today to celebrate the Feast of Purim. We understand that it was in the week, but as everybody knows that we all have work, our own business to attempt to do it throughout the week. So we weren't able to congregate and to celebrate it as what we're doing today. So we're doing it today on this Sabbath. Okay, and first and foremost, let me just introduce myself. I'm Brother Anaya. This is Brother Shamar. Okay, and it's good to see all you brothers and sisters here. Thank the Most High that He guided and protected everybody and brought them safely here for another gathering. And concerning the Feast of Purim, we're going to go into the book of Esther. Okay, and the reason why we're going into the book of Esther is, I'm sure our brothers and sisters are familiar with this book and have read this book before, right? And read the story concerning Esther and Mordecai. But for brothers and sisters who do not know concerning why we celebrate the Feast of Purim, this is where the Feast of Purim was established in this book concerning Esther. So we're going to go into the book and we're going to read. We're going to do quite a bit of reading today. So some of you might think it's long, but it's not going to be that long. Okay, but just to get the understanding of what led up to how the Feast of Purim was established. Okay, so we're going to read from Esther, the first chapter, up until the 9th chapter. Okay, or the end of the 9th chapter. Alright? So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay? So we're in the book of Esther, chapter 1, verse 1.
Book of Esther, chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Asarius, this is Asarius, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces, that in those days when the king Asarius sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, and the nobles and princes of the provinces.
So when you see this king Ahasuerus, okay, this king is his name could, when you look in especially when you go into the eSword, right, and you check it out, you check out that name in the eSword, and the eSword breaks it down for you. It goes back to a name called Xerxes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that name, Xerxes. If whoever watched the movie 300, that Persian king that was fighting against Leonidas, the one with the nose ringing at him, that was King Xerxes because he was a Persian. Alright, they're saying he is in India, but we know that India is right next to Iraq and Iran. It's in that same vicinity. And he was ruling, as the Bible says, from when you read verse 1 in Esther chapter 1 and 1. He was ruling over 127 provinces. Okay, so he had a lot of territories covered. Okay, that's how far his kingdom was. Like it stretched from Ethiopia, from India even onto Ethiopia. Okay, so that's how much provinces that he was ruling over that territory. Okay, read on.
Being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom, and the honor of his excellent majesty, many days, even 180 days. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all people that were present in Shushan, the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hangings fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings, and pillars made of marble. The beds were of gold and silver, upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance according to the state of the king.
So you can see that this brother had all different kind of vessels to pour drink in. Different. He was royalty, so he had a lot of riches. Okay? He had it up. Alright, he was living good. Read.
And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel. For so the king had appointed to all officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zithar, Carcas, 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus, the king, to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all that knew the law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face, and sat the first in the kingdom.
Well, let me ask a question to everyone so that we can all be on one accord here. Who's the Persian in the meat? Iran and Iraq, right? The Persians in the meat, right? Yes. All right. So when he's saying about Persian media, that was Iran and Iraq in that day and time, which that's what they were called. They were named Persia and Media, but today they're called Iran and Iraq. All right, read on.
What shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she has not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains? And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen had not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus.
Okay, so during this time, just to give a storyline so that people can, understand, like, at the time where Esther was. Okay, this time, the children of Israel, they got conquered by the Medes and the Persian. This is during the time of Darius and Cyrus. Okay, they were kings of Media and Persia. Okay, when they took them to Babylon. So at this time, all the children of Israel they're captives in Babylon. So this is where the story is taking place. This is nowhere to do in Jerusalem. All right, read.
For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes when it shall be reported. And the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto the king's princes, which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she.
So the king now, his wife Vashti, he was calling her now to come before him. He wanted to introduce her to all of his friends because she was beautiful. All right, but she said, nah. I don't want to meet your friends. Furthermore, I don't even want to see you. She's talking to the king. So the king was wrath. He took this as a disrespect. So he's counseling with all the wise men then beside him and saying, yo, what's going on with my queen? Like, why is she moving like that? How come she don't want to come out and meet everybody and show off her beauty? Especially to meet a king. That's like a slap in the face, right? So now they're saying, okay, let's make a decree now. Put out a decree there. These wise men are telling the king, put out a decree there to everybody to say that, listen, the king's not going to deal no more with Vashti. He's not going to command her to come out to him no more. Meaning that he's done. He's going to put her away. And he's gonna find the next woman. He's going to find another queen. All right? Why? Because she didn't obey his commandment when he was calling her out to be introduced to his brethren or to his fellow friends them that were at the banquet that he had. All right, read on.
And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, All the wives shall to their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all kings' provinces, into every province according to their writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear and rule his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. Chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king.
So right now he's selling out. He's like, listen, go into all the villages and the cities and find the prettiest woman. Let them stand before me, because I'm gonna find myself a new wife now, a new queen. Read.
And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hedge, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them.
Okay, read on.
And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shemi, the son of Kish, a Benjamite.
So we can see here that Mordecai was a Benjamite. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. Read.
Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Adasa, that is Esther.
That was another name. That's what they called Esther, Adasa. Read.
His uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter.
So what tribe was Esther from?
Benjamin.
She was a Benjamite, right? Because she was a daughter of Mordecai's brother. Right? Exactly. All right, read on.
So it came to pass when the king's commandment...
Or excuse me, his uncle's daughter, excuse me. So they're from the same lineage. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the woman. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were met to be given her, out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the woman. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the woman's house, to know how Esther did, and what should become of her. Now when every maid's turn was to come to go in to the king Ahasuerus, after she had been 12 months, according to the manner of women, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit 6 months, with oil of myrrh, and 6 months sweet odors, with other things for purifying of the woman.
So this is what when the king chose all these women to come, for him to choose one of them to be his wife, they had to be purified for a year. Okay, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and another 6 months with sweet odors like a perfume. So for 6 months they were oiling up, had a nice complexion on their skin, a nice glow, and smelling nice for another 6 months. Okay, that was their purification, because I guess the king didn't like his woman smelling bad. And they had to look, even though they were beautiful already, they had to be more extra beautiful, because now they're all, as some women would say, dolled up or done up. Okay, so you know they're extremely pretty throughout that whole year. Okay, and smelling good. Read on.
Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given to her. Go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the woman to the custody of Ashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was to come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the woman, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that took upon her.
So the Most High gave Esther favor more than all these other beautiful virgins that she was up against, you know, that wanted to be the wife of or the next queen. So she had favor even with the king's chamberlain, the king's servant. Them, they're like, yeah, this one is a special one. We're gonna hold this one. You know, this one might be the next queen. Okay, so that was the blessing of her just being a chosen seed. Okay, her being of Israelite stock. The Most High was with her. All right, read on.
So Esther was taken unto Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
See, look at that. He just made her queen, just like there was something about Esther that mesmerized the king. That he was like, man, she's just different. She's just different from everybody else. Like, you know.
Esther 2:17. And the king loved Esther above all women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti.
So Esther is the new queen instead of Vashti, which was the queen's former wife. Read.
Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him.
So Esther was in the palace, being made queen, and Mordecai told her, "Listen, I'm gonna put you as one of these virgins, so the king can choose you to be a wife to him. But don't tell him about your kindred. Don't tell him about me. I'm your family. But don't let him know that you have family. Okay, I'm gonna be outside here. You stay in there." So all this is going on when Esther was made queen. Mordecai didn't even have a clue. He was outside in the king's gate. Okay, he was just there outside of the palace, just waiting for word. Okay, read on.
In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of whose which kept the door.
Read 20 for me again. Start at 20 for me now.
Esther had not yet showed her kindred, nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king.
So Mordecai is outside of the gate, and he's hearing two of the king's former servants who did not like the king. Furthermore, they're plotting to have the king killed. They're like, yo, we can't even believe this guy. You know, maybe all the queen maybe was a relative to them. Who knows? Probably doesn't matter the king for some reason. But talking about the king, when Mordecai was outside of the king's gate, Mordecai overheard them. and told Esther, like, listen, these two guys, yo, I'm outside here and these two guys there, yo, look like they want to hang the king. Yo, let the king know what's going on. Okay, so Esther went and told the king all of this and said, listen, you know, this man named Mordecai was my uncle, and she let the king know, listen, this man is a true man. I know him. He's family. Okay, and what he says is true. These two men are plotting against you. All right. So this is what's happening here, and what happened? The king found out who these two guys were, and hanged both of them. Done. Threat gone. All right. Read on.
After these things did the king Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all princes that were with him.
So we see this, now we see that the king found now replacement for these two guys. So he found Haman, the Agagite, okay? And this Haman, the son of Hammedatha, he's from Agag. Agag is an Amalekite. So he was an Edomite, okay? This Haman was an Edomite. He was from the seed of Esau, okay, or the seed of Edom. Read.
And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment?
So everybody else was paying homage to Haman, but Mordecai's like, nah, I know who he is. I'm a Jew. He's like, nah, we're not going to pay no homage to him, because according to us Hebrews, we know that they were heathen, right? So no, the only person that we would bow to was who? The Most High, right? Exactly. All right, read on.
Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew.
There you go. All right, read on.
And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath.
So Haman is here. He's vexed, because he's like, yo, this guy's supposed, yo, I'm the king's servant. Yo, the king put me over all. You know, he made me a servant over all his princes, or above all his princes that was around the king. So Haman was like in a high position. He was probably our second or third down in line from the king. So he had power. So he's seen like Mordecai, who's nothing, who's a nobody. All right, yeah, he's an uncle of the queen, but still nobody. He's like, yo, this man's supposed to be bound to me like everybody else. So he was mad. All right, read on.
And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for he had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai.
So there you go again with Esau. Okay, Esau made this declaration from when he sold his birthright to Jacob. Okay, and when he said, listen, when my father dies, listen, I'm gonna kill Jacob. I'm gonna kill Israel. Okay, and look, this is that vow that's still going on right now, even in this time. Okay, because it was only Mordecai that did something that didn't pay him reverence. Now this guy wants to kill all the Jews them in the city, because he's like, okay, if Mordecai is not gonna pay homage to me, none of the rest of them is going to pay homage to me. Why? Because he understand that they live by a certain law. Okay? And it was not according to the other heathen them or the other nations. All right? Read on.
In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, that is the month Adar.
So when they were casting lots, right? That means like they were picking straws. Okay, a lot is like you can use it as a term for gambling, because even when you read in the New Testament concerning Christ and his garments, how the Roman soldiers them were casting lots for his garments. Then, okay, they're gambling basically. Okay, so this now they're casting lots concerning Mordecai. Listen, what are we gonna do? Let's put these rocks together and see whoever picks out or cast or put straws in her hand, and whichever picks out the shortest one, then listen, that person is going to come up with what we're going to do to this brother. All right? So this is what they were doing concerning for Mordecai. They were casting lots for him, or what they call Pur. Okay, read.
And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all provinces of thy kingdom. And their laws are diverse from all people.
And their laws are diverse from all people. Read.
Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them.
Read on.
For it pleased the king. Let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have charge of the business, to bring it to the king's treasuries.
Read.
And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemies.
Read.
And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them that it as it seemeth good to thee.
So Haman now is bringing a proposition to the king and saying, listen, there's a certain people that's in your country that they have been dispersed and scattered over your country. But listen, they don't pay homage to you. They furthermore they don't serve you. They have a God that they serve. Okay, but listen, king, listen, we're gonna deal with this though. All you gotta do is give me $10,000 out of your treasury. Just give me some money out of your treasury, and listen, I'm gonna make sure I get somebody who can wipe out these people, kill all of them. All right. He doesn't want to use his own money. He wants the king to give him money to finance him, so that he can be able to pay off some people to destroy these Jews. Okay. Just because Mordecai, one man, did not bow down to him, he wants to kill the entire nation of Jews that was in that country at that time. Read.
Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the
Read
first
11.
month.
Start at chapter 11.
And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemed good to thee.
So he not only gave him the treasure, but he also gave him people to do the bidding. Okay, along with the money. Read on.
Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to their writings thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, to take and spoil them for prey.
So there's a letter now that went out. There's a decree now that's going out to all the people that was in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Okay, that's so kill all these Jews, kill all of them, women, children, baby. Listen, any Jew that moved, kill it. All right, this is how they were dealing with these people who didn't even do nothing. All right, just because of one man. But as I said, this stems back way back with Esau and Jacob. So that was a vow now that's still being fulfilled even until this day. This vow is still going on, because why? We are still being persecuted.
And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take spoil of them for prey. The copy of writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given to Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried out with a loud and a bitter cry.
So Mordecai heard everything now, what Haman was planning to do to all the rest of the Jews. And Mordecai was saying to himself, man, he's doing this because I wouldn't bow to him. So now because I wouldn't bow to him, he's planning to kill everybody because of my sake. So he rent his clothes. He started mourning now, because he's like, man, what's going on here? Just because I didn't bow to this guy, he wants to kill everybody now. Now he felt it was a burden. It was him. So he's feeling that burden on himself. Read on.
And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter the king's gates clothed with sackcloth.
Read.
And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes.
So all of them were renting their clothes. They were mourning, fasting, because why? They knew about the decree that was gone out that, yo, the king and his servant Haman wanted all of them dead. And they were like, yo, why? What did we do? We've been living here all these years, and all of a sudden now the king just wants to kill us for no reason. So everybody's mourning. They're praying to God. They're fasting because they're like, yo, we need protection. All right, read.
So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her to her. Then was queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not.
So this was told to Esther about what's going on, about them wanting to kill the Jews. So, you know, she heard about her uncle Mordecai. You know, he's in sackcloth and ashes right in front of the king's gate, fasting and mourning. And she's like, okay, you know, I'm going to send some clothes for him so that, you know, he can look proper, clean up himself. But Mordecai, yo, I don't want that. All right, because he knew the decree that was sent out and that this was serious. All right, read.
Then all Esther and Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai onto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them.
So now Esther was telling Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, to go to Mordecai and let him know this is the reason why they want to kill all the Jews. This is the reason. Okay, it's for money and because of Mordecai not wanting to bow down to Haman. All right, read.
And he also gave him a copy of the writings of the decree that was given to Shushan to destroy them, and show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and charge her that she should go in unto the king and make a supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people.
So Esther didn't know nothing about this decree, the letter that was sent out to all the Jews that was outside of the palace in the provinces. So Mordecai had the letter and he saw the decree and he's like, yo, he sent it back with the same Hathach, the king's chamberlain, to say, yo, give this to Esther, let her see exactly what's going on. Let her see exactly what's going on, that this is a decree gone out to into all the provinces for them to kill all the Jews. All right, and for her to tell it on to the king now, okay, to stop all of this. All right, read on.
And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake unto Hathach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whatsoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such of whom the king shall hold out the gold scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come unto the king these 30 days.
So there was a law concerning King Ahasuerus, that anybody who wanted to speak to the king would have to already give them a commandment to come and speak to him. If the king didn't say, okay, send this brother or this sister to come and speak to me, and you just wanted to go and speak to the king, just like that, just to go into the king's court, listen, if he didn't put out his scepter and make you touch it, that means that, listen, you're going to die. You're going to be executed because he didn't call you. So if you come to say, okay, you know what, I want to speak to the king, and you came to one of his guards and say, listen, it's an urgent matter, I need to speak to the king, and the king don't know anything about it, he just coming up unannounced, he didn't call you. Listen, if he didn't put out his scepter, if you go in front of him and he didn't put out his scepter and say, listen, okay, touch my scepter, if he didn't put it out towards you to touch it, then you'd be dead on the spot. You wouldn't even be able to utter a word. Okay, that was one rule in this kingdom. All right, you can't go to the king unless you are called. Okay, if the king called you to speak to you, that's the only way you can come and put forth a matter. Other than that, stay your place until you've been called. All right, read.
And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews.
So Mordecai was telling Esther, listen, you're a Jew too. Okay, you're a Jew too. So, hey, eventually they're going to kill you too. Okay, because they want to eradicate all the Jews. All right, read.
For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
So this is what Mordecai is saying to Esther now. Listen, hey, who knows if you've been come to the kingdom? You've been blessed to be queen right now. Maybe this was a sign from the Most High. Not knowing that a time like this was supposed to happen. So he set you up in a position now where you're going to be able to save us now. We don't know how it's going to be done, but you're in that position to do that. That's what he's saying here in the letter to Esther. All right, read.
Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish.
Okay, and the scripture says, with your, with fasting and prayer, let your supplication be made known unto the Most High. So fasting and prayer is good, because when you do this now, it's a connection. It's more of a connection now to you with the Most High. You're denying yourself of things that you need to survive every day, food and water. These are the necessities of life. Okay, you're putting this away for you for 3 days. No food or no water touching your mouth. This is big. And praying to the Most High. This is what they were doing. Everybody could. This is the decree that Esther sent out to all the saying, yo, let's go on a 3-day fast, because we gotta make the Most High. We need the Most High right now. All right, but this is our people. This is when they needed to speak to the Most High. Listen, nobody got a zeal like us. When we're ready to ask God for help, listen. Nobody can do praise or fast or pray to God like how we can do it when we need Him. You understand? Read on.
I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish.
So she's going in uninvited. Okay, so she knew according to the law. Listen, he didn't call me, but I'm going. I need to speak to him. All right, and if I die, I die. But I'm gonna try doing it. Okay. Read on.
So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter.
So see, there you go. She found favor in the sight of the king. He held out that scepter. She was like, okay, I'm good. I'm in. You know what I'm saying? I can say what I need to say now, because I don't have to worry about death, because now I found favor. The king accepts me now. All right. He wants to hear what I have to say. All right. Read on.
Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, queen? Then the king said unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given to thee to the half of the kingdom.
So he's telling her, listen, what is it? What do you want to ask me? You want half of my kingdom? If she was asking for half of the kingdom, he was like, yo, you can have it. No problem. This is how much he loved Esther. All right. This is how much favor Esther found in the sight of the king. All right. Read on.
And Esther answered, if it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come to this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste. Then the king said, cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared.
So Esther prepared a nice dinner for the king and Haman. All right, read.
And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then Esther and said, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king had said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai.
So, Haman, he heard that, okay, yeah, he's invited to a banquet, a dinner with the king. Left all happy saying, yeah, I'm gonna eat good. Me and the king is gonna sit down and break bread. Okay, leaving all happy out of the kingdom, and he see Mordecai now at the king's gate. And Mordecai was looking at him like, yo, what's good? You know what I'm saying? And usually when Haman came around, everybody would be bowing, paying homage. But us Jews, Israel, if we don't like you, listen, you're gonna get a cut eye or something or a couple words. You know what I'm saying? So Mordecai didn't even pay Haman any mind. All right, just like when he didn't bow to him, he did the same thing when he saw him this time. He didn't he's like, whatever, hurry up, boy, move it. You know what I'm saying? Move it along. Read on.
Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife.
Read.
And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above all the princes and the servants of the king.
So he went home and he's telling all of his friends, I'm like, listen, man, I got a really good job, man. Listen, I'm living it up. I made it, I got a whole bunch of riches right now. And, I'm like the second in command next to the king. So, I got all this power. So, he's bragging about his position to all of his friends and his wife, his family. All right, read.
And Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with me, the king, unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king.
So he felt so special because when Esther invited him and the king, he was like, listen, it was just me that she chose out of all the other servants in the palace. Me. Me and the king. It's like, he felt big. He's like, what? Me, the king and the queen? He's like, who gets that? You know what I'm saying? Read.
Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate.
So that was a thorn in his side, because he's like, listen, I'm being invited to the banquet, just me, the king and the queen. But every time when I see this dude, I'm going to the king's gate. This man rubs me the wrong way. So he's like vexed, because he's like, listen, even though I have this position, when I see this guy, I feel like I'm nothing, because Mordecai made him feel like he was nothing, because Mordecai didn't pay no homage to him. Mordecai didn't put him up on a pedestal like other people did. All right, read on.
Then said Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made.
So now he's making he wants to hang him, Mordecai, because he's like, his wife, putting in the request. Now we know who runs the house. She's saying, yeah, listen, don't worry, I got this. I got a plan. This is what you're gonna do. Go make a gallows, and you're gonna hang this brother tomorrow. Okay, just go in happily to the banquet, eat your food, and just don't worry. When you come home, this brother's dead. All right, read.
On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus.
So these were the two guys that Mordecai heard talking about the king when Mordecai was by the gate, and sent word to Esther, and the king hanged both of those guys. This is who the king is reading about, who he hanged. All right, these two guys who were plotting for him. Read.
And the king said, what honor and dignity had been done to Mordecai for this?
Read.
Then said the king's service that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him.
So this was told to the king by Mordecai. So he's reading in the Chronicles now that, this was the man that, exposed these two guys who was trying to do harm to the king. So the king's like, what did he get? For saving my life. And man's like, nothing. So, now we're going to see what the king's going to do. Read on.
And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him.
Read.
And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. And so Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head.
So now the king is saying to Haman now, listen, hey, I need to honor somebody. He's putting something to Haman like, listen, if I need to honor a man, like, how should I honor him? So Haman now, with all his knowledge and, being the second in command, he's trying to tell the king, listen, get your best pair, get the best pair of clothes, put it on this man. Get the finest horse. Let him ride upon it. Give him some jewelry, a chain and a ring. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Let him know that, yeah, you're setting him up good. All right? Not knowing that the king is talking to him concerning Mordecai. So right there, him who's planning to kill Mordecai, he's telling the king, not knowing, he's actually putting Mordecai now in a good state, not even knowing that. All right? But we're going to see what the king's what's going to happen. Read on.
And let this apparel and the horse be delivered to the hand of the one of the king's most noble princes. Mm-hmm. Then they may array the man withal whom the king delighted to honor, mm-hmm. and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor.
Read.
Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and horse as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken.
See, look at that. So now the king is saying, listen, you take all this clothes, the horse, you do it now. You're going to be the delivery man now. And give it on to Mordecai. Like, listen, this is, this brother, he'd rather take a stab in the heart than do this. To know like how much he hated Mordecai, much less, he was coming to the king to say, listen, I want to hang this brother tomorrow. Okay? Now the king is telling him now to go get good clothes, to get a fine horse, and a whole bunch of treasure and give it to this brother and honor him and bring him to me. Okay, you do it himself. Alright, so like he ain't feeling too good about this, and we're gonna see. Read on.
Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus it shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor.
Read.
And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, having his head covered.
Read on.
And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. And then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him.
So now his wife and his wise man, they're like, listen, if this man is really of a Jew, and we know about the God of the Jews, if he's really who he says he is, listen, you're not going to be able to do nothing to him. Furthermore, listen, you're going to die. You're going to fall. Okay, if you're planning to kill him, you're gonna get killed instead. Okay, because they're like, it don't look good for you right now, because I know I was telling him to build that gallows, but he ain't gonna be hanging on it. Okay, read on.
And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman onto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Read.
So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, and I and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage.
So she is telling the king now, listen, you know, we've been sold for us to be destroyed and perish. But if we were just being sold for slaves, I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said that. It would have been okay. We're okay with that. But she's like, nah, somebody is made a petition to kill us and to destroy us. All right? Read on.
Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so?
So here comes the good part, because now we understand that Haman was the one that brought this petition to the king. Okay? And who the queen right now, Esther, is talking about is Haman. Right? And she's gonna let it be known that it's him. Okay? So we're gonna see what's gonna happen. Read on.
And Esther said, the adversary, the enemy, is the wicked Haman.
Is the wicked Haman, the one that's sitting right beside you in the banquet. All right, read.
Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen.
Just imagine, you're at a banquet, the king and the queen, thinking that, you know what, you're gonna be treated like royalty. You're gonna be living it up. Eating some good food, not knowing that you're coming to a dinner to be condemned. You know what I'm saying? To be condemned. So he all of a sudden he didn't want to be there no more. I could see, like, when she mentioned his name, he was like, nah, listen, I want to get as far away from this place as possible, because now he knows he's in trouble now. Because the queen has found the king has found favor in the side of Esther. He's telling her, listen, tell me anything that you want me to do, even half of my kingdom. All this aiming her. So he's like, man, the king's ready to give her even half of the kingdom. Like, I can't even get that. You know what I'm saying? So he knows that, it's done. He's lost. Read on.
Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen, and the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king.
So right now he's like, Esther, listen, I'm sorry. He's begging for his life now. He's begging because he knows that it's either death. He's gonna be a death or thrown in prison or him being demoted. But he knows that it's not going his way right now. All right, because the king's mad. All right, read.
Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Abarna, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon.
So somebody told the king, listen, this brother has a gallows in his house 50 foot high. That was made to hang Mordecai. And the king was like, what? Mordecai, who? The man who I just sent Haman to go bring clothes and horse to? Yeah? The one that saved my life? Okay, so king's like, hang Haman on that. Hang him. Okay, read.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
So he wasn't mad no more. He was alright. He's like, okay, judgment, done. Alright, read on.
On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman.
So Mordecai ended up getting Haman's house and all his wealth and his riches. All right, read.
And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the gold scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king.
I'm telling you, man, Esther was like, listen, she could have went before the king without the king. She had it up, because anybody else would have did that, they would have been dead. Every time she went to the king without being called, he would always hand out that scepter to her and let her know that, listen, you're good. You know, whatever you want to tell me, tell me. I'll even give you half of the kingdom. So she always had that favor with the king. All right, which would anybody else, they believe me, they would have been dead. Okay, no scepter would be being handed out to them. All right, read.
And said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces.
So she like, listen, the decree that was made out to kill all of us, listen, yo, reverse that, send it back. You understand? Because yo, we found out that this guy he's wrong anyway. All right, read on.
For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come onto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred?
Because even during this time, that decree still stand. Even though Haman died, that decree still stand, because that was a decree came from the king. Okay, so yo, if that wasn't reversed, everybody would have still thought it would be okay to kill all the Jews, because this is a decree coming. It wasn't coming from Haman; it was coming from the king. So whatever the king decree was, that's what anybody had to perform if they wanted to get these riches. All right, because he had $10,000 of his treasure, okay, like ready, lined up for who can kill all these Jews in one day. In one day, all of them. All right, read.
Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews.
Read on.
Write ye also for the Jews, as it is liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring.
So now there's another decree now that's going out with the king's seal. All right, read.
For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse.
May no man reverse. Only the king can reverse that. All right, read.
Then were the king's scribes called at the time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, and 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writings thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writings, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young
dromedaries,
wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and for their life to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all of the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, to take the spoil from them for prey, upon one day in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies.
So now here's the decree now, okay, that's being reversed from the former decree, that's saying now the Jews now should prepare themselves now to revenge themselves against their enemies, to revenge themselves on those who want to see them dead, such as Haman and all his people, his wise men, his wives, his family, because they also share the same feeling as Haman. All right, especially now that they found out that Haman got hanged. Okay, because why? Everything what he was planning, the pit that he was digging for Mordecai, he fell in his own pit. All right, read.
So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hasted and pressed on by the king's commandment. And the decree was given to Shushan the palace, and Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue, white, and with great crown of gold, with the garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad.
So Mordecai, he had it, man. He was in royalty. He was in a royal position right now. Okay, so read on.
The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast, a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them.
You see that? Many of the people of that land who were not Jews, they became Jews. Why? Because now there was a decree now that went out to say, listen, the Jews, now anybody that wants to come and hurt you, the Jews, they could go and avenge themselves now. So if they found somebody who had art against them, who even looked at them the wrong way, the Jews then were allowed to kill that person. So people them who know that they weren't even Jews, that they're like, listen, I don't even want to be classified as somebody else who don't like these Jews. So I'm going to become a Jew myself. And people were converting left and right just to be a Jew so that they wouldn't be avenged on. They wouldn't get killed by the Jews then. Because now they see that the Jews them had favor in the side of the king. Why? Because he had a Jew for a wife, and plus Mordecai, who was probably his second in command, just like how Haman was. Okay, so listen, the Jews royalty right now. They have power. All right, read.
Now when the 12th month, that is, the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay on hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people.
So everybody was scared of the Jews, because now the day was come now where the Jews was like, listen, it's a day when they go and find anybody who they thought at the time wanted to kill them when that decree went out. Okay, that they should be all killed, woman, child. Yeah, they were like, okay, I saw this guy looking at me at that time funny doing that when that decree come out. We know this brother wants to kill us. This day now they were able to kill this brother without no questions asked. All right, but everybody was feared. They feared the people. As I said, people started converting to being Jews now, because why? Nobody wanted to be killed. All right, read.
And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and deputies and officers of the king helped the Jews, because of the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slayed and destroyed 500 men. And Parshan, Datha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Paratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmasta, and Arasa, and Aridai, and Vajasatha.
Some hard names, brother. These are all Persians, so don't worry about it. Read on.
Then the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemies of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid not their hand.
So all these people that they named was all the people that the Jews them slew, that they knew wanted to kill them when that first decree went out to slew all the Jews. All right. Plus Haman's 10 sons, his family too got slew, because, as I said, likewise, they had the same feeling as their father towards the Jews. All right, but when they killed all of these people, they had gold and riches, but the Jews them never touched that. They're like, no, we don't even want that. All right, read.
On that day, the number of those who were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king, and the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is it thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done?
Read.
Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows.
So here goes Haman's 10 sons going to be killed now, just like their father. Read.
And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Susan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Susan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Susan. But on the prey they laid not their hand.
So they never touched the riches. They never touched the spoil. All they wanted to do was just kill these people that wanted to kill them in the beginning. All right, who hated them for no reason. Read.
But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had the rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000.
75,000 people who hated them. That's who the Jews them slew when the king gave them a decree to avenge themselves. So 75,000 people hated these Jews, okay, and wanted to kill them when this first decree went out. All right, so now the Jews avenged themselves, and when they kill all of these men that wanted to kill them, they're relaxed, they're at rest now, because they're like, listen, all our enemies are gone, they're dead. We don't have to worry about nothing no more. All right, read on.
And slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey.
So they didn't want their money. The Jews them were rich themselves. Listen, we just want their lives. That's it. All right, read on.
On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested, and they made it a day of feasting and gladness.
Now this is where Purim comes in now. All right, so after all of this, now when they slew all their enemies, now they rested and they feasted on this day. All right, read on.
But the Jews that were at Susan assembled together on the 15th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested.
Read 18 again for me, brother.
But the Jews that were at Susan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day of thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness.
Okay, so different provinces where there were Jews, they would one would celebrate on the 13th day, one would do it on the 14th day, and one would do it on the 15th day. But they were all celebrating the same thing. Why? Avenging their enemies. That was all the celebration was about. All right, read on.
Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another.
So this could either been food, whatever it is, gifts, whatever the case be. Okay, usually it was food, portions, because these were the poor of the villages and the towns. So they made their feast day on the 14th day. All right, read.
And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all Jews that were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly.
Yes, read on.
As the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, from mourning into a good day, that they should make them the days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor.
So this is what we call Purim, and this is what we're doing right now. All right, continue.
And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and to cast pur, and that is the lot, to consume them, and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur.
Okay, and this is after the name Pur. All right, because it's coming back from when Haman was casting the lots now. So drawing straws now, or gambling, okay, using money or whatever the case was, just to see what would be done to Haman, okay. But now the Jews call that now a day of giving gifts. All right, sending portions one to another. All right, read on.
Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail. And they would keep these 2 days according to their writings and according to their appointed time every year.
So it's actually, as I said, it is a 2 days that you can celebrate the Feast of Purim, and it's on the gathering of Christ.org. It's on that website. It's 2 days, but you can also do it on 1 day. It doesn't matter. All right, but it's 2 days that was officially established. All right, read on.
And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation.
Throughout every what?
Every generation.
Read on.
Every family. Every province. Every city. And that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.
So this should always be remembered. When you see the memorial, there's just like when you read in Exodus 3 and 13 concerning the Most High's name. It was a memorial from unto all generations, meaning that all generations is supposed to remember this. Don't forget the Most High's name. Always remember His name. This is supposed to be something that you remember and kept from generation to generation. Read on.
Then Esther, the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm the second letter of Purim.
Read.
And he sent the letter unto all Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed, the matters of the fastings and their cry.
Yeah.
And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
And it was written in the book. All right. So, now when you go to anybody now, since we have all the understanding now concerning the Purim, and we know where it's established in the Bible. You can bring brothers and sisters here who don't know. When they ask you, okay, when you tell them, listen, I'm celebrating Purim today. They're like, what's that? You can break it down now and tell them why, because now we have the understanding now of how that day was established. We understand what the Jews had to go through, what was being done to them at the beginning for them this day to even come up. Okay, so this is Purim, and it's a day that we do give gifts. Okay, it's not December 25th. Okay. December 25th is pagan. Okay, so we don't give gifts on that day, and we don't even pay homage to that day. Okay, so this is the day that we can give gifts not only to our family, but also to our friends, our children, etc. Whoever you choose to give a gift to, according to the culture of the Israelites. Okay, this is what we do. This is the day that we give gifts. Okay, this is what we call our so-called Christmas. Okay, but this is what the reason of that day was established, because of them. At first, Haman wanted to slew all the Jews. Okay, and that got reversed. Okay, and then he was found out to be, to be a hateful man, hating against a man who saved the king's life, which was Mordecai. Okay, so everything that Haman was planning for not only Mordecai, but all the other Jews who didn't even do him anything, got reversed, and it came back upon his own head. All right, so this is how that day has been established. All right, and thank the Most High that Esther, the Most High used a woman. Okay, so hey, it wasn't just the man them the Most High was using; he was also using the woman them. Okay, because if she wasn't in that position, okay, listen, Mordecai couldn't go into the king's court and say, listen, let me speak to the king. Listen, if no scepter was held out to Mordecai, listen, done. All right, but see, thank the Most High that Esther had favor in the sight of the king, and every time that she wanted to say something to the king without, the king even calling her, she would be able to have that favor, and the king wanted to hear her and more, even give her the half of his kingdom. Okay, so thank the Most High for, our sister. Okay, because hey, if that wasn't the case, I don't think a lot of us Benjamites, especially, would be here today. You know what I'm saying? So, our praises to our high for that. All right, so this is how the Feast of Purim was established. Okay, and as I said, this is what we're going to celebrate today. And this is our first time even celebrating the Feast of Purim, to tell you the truth, as a congregation, as part of the GOCC here. So, this is it's okay. We're learning, but next year coming, I'm sure we all will understand now why we do this and be able to do it. You know what I'm saying, accordingly. But until then, we're gonna feast, and we're gonna eat some food, listen to some music, and just enjoy ourselves, be merry. Okay, with wine and food. Okay, but that's it. And just wanted to go on that and share that with the brothers and sisters. And oh yeah, one more thing. All right, when you read the book of Esther, all right, you can see that it ends off on the 10th chapter, and it ends off weird. Which chapter ends at verse 3? Okay, it ends off weird. Okay, it shows that there's still a continuation, and there is. We ascribe to this book. This book is called the Apocrypha. This book is 14 books that was taken out of the original Bible. If you have a 1611 King James Bible, this book, the books that are in the Apocrypha, is included in the 1611 King James Version Bible. Okay, so when you go into the Apocrypha, Esther is continued. Okay, the book of Esther is continued in the Apocrypha. Right? And this is the thing, though. This is why they took out the book, because there's a lot of more things that Esther did in the Apocrypha that is great things that she did. All right? But, the people who took out the book out of the Bible and made it a separate book, they don't want you to know that. Okay? Because when you start off reading the Apocrypha, it tells you the book of Esther, which are found neither in the Hebrew nor in the Chaldee. And it tells you part of the 10th chapter after the Greek. So it's continuing from the 10th chapter that was broken off from the Bible, and it continues right here. The 10th chapter continues in the book of Esther in the Apocrypha. All right? So same book. This is supposed to be in here with any King James Bible it's supposed to be in, but they did it strategically. Why? Because they didn't want us to have certain information that this book has. All right? This book reveals a lot of stuff that the Bible doesn't reveal. Okay? But they're the same book. So anytime you have a Bible, make sure you get an Apocrypha. Then you have the complete Bible. If you don't have the Apocrypha, you don't have a complete Bible. All right? So this is how you know. All right? But that's it for the lesson. I want to say shalom, and let's feast. Okay? Is there any questions? First and foremost.
I just wanted to read a little bit out of the rest of Esther in the Apocrypha.
Go ahead, brother. Share that.
It's just a little more information about Haman.
Mm-hmm.
It says, it's chapter 16, verse 10. It says, "For Haman, a Macedonian, the son of Ammedatha, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood, and far distant from our goodness, and as a stranger received of us." So it tells you more specifically, he was an Amalekite, but he was also from the land of Macedonia, and then this gives you a link later to where Alexander the Greek came from, which is Macedonia. And it tells you a little bit farther down in verse 14, "For by these means he thought, finding us destitute of friends, to have translated the kingdom of the Persians to the Macedonians." So it gives you a little more insight that Haman actually wanted to overthrow the Jews so that he could get closer to the Persians and overthrow them for the Macedonians, which is exactly what Alexander the Greek did anyway.
Exactly. And when you watch it, especially with that movie, I don't know if any brothers see that movie Alexander. You ever anybody see that movie Alexander? With no, it was Colin Farrell. Watch that movie. That movie will tell you how Alexander. You saw that movie, right? You never saw that movie? Watch Alexander. Watch Alexander. And it tells you exactly what this brother was a homosexual. Straight. Flamer. Alright? Like, listen, he was a warrior though. He was a great warrior. But when he was on his downtime, he loved men. That was his preference. And he had wives. Even he got a Persian wife at one time. And it shows in a movie that, she wanted him to sleep with her at one point. And he wouldn't. And she was like, "You don't even sleep with me." But watch that movie. I recommend that movie. Like, that will show you his conquest and how he even went to these countries, and took them over. Okay, and this is where Haman is stemming from, as our brother Thomas shared with us. Thank you, brother. Thank you. So, but yeah, all right. So he wanted not only just to kill the Jews, But as Brother Thomas said when you read in the Apocrypha, he also wanted to overthrow the Persians and take over their land. All right? So this brother had a plan. Listen, he didn't just come in and say, listen, I just want to be a servant to the king or second in command to the king. He wanted to be king. Because if he'd have killed the Jews, guess what? He would have found a way to kill the king also. And the rest of the Persians. So that was his plan, one at a time. But thank the Most High for Esther. Okay, thank the Most High. All right, so that's that. Brothers and sisters, any more questions? No? All right, let's feast.